We're going live. And we're live. Welcome, 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 everyone. We're here, ready to go. How are we all doing today? Where's everyone from? We're here a couple minutes early. We're just getting things situated and signed up, everyone organized and in their place. I'm organized in my place. Bella, say hello. She's in her place.
Hello.
Welcome, welcome, everyone. Today is Sunday. Happy Sunday. I hope everyone's having a good weekend so far. I'm having a good weekend. I'm having a really good weekend. I've been looking forward to doing this chicken wing demo since the idea of it popped into our head. Like, I have been looking forward to making these. I've been looking forward to eating these. I am so excited for this, and I hope you all are as well. It's going to be a good one today. We're going to wait a couple minutes. We're a few minutes early here, so please make yourselves comfortable. Go grab yourselves a water. Go do whatever you need to do. Check on the dog. Well, the dog, I imagine the dog is probably right here. You can pet the dog, say hi to the dog. Dogs love chicken wings. And, we're on track here. We're on track for a very, very good day.
Good Sunday. Hi, John from Exton, Pennsylvania.
John, welcome back. Thanks for joining, as always. Who else we have here? Who's here? Where is everyone from?
We're still a few minutes early. So
in the chat room.
You were still a few minutes early. So
we're a few minutes early.
People are just coming in.
It's okay. Welcome. You're just joining us. You're in the right place. We're just giving ourselves
what? Their mise en place.
Mise en place, right? Mise en place. Mm-hmm. Put in place, things in place. We're all in our place here. I'm ready to go, but we're gonna wait.
Lori's here from beautiful White Rock, British Columbia.
Oh, coming in from way east, northeast?
No, British Columbia.
North of here.
Joe has problems.
I have problems with geography. I was schooled in Las Vegas, Nevada, in a public school, so that was my middle, elementary, and high school years, and I guess it shows with my knowledge of geography.
Riverside, California.
I know where Riverside is. Welcome, Riverside. Orange County in the house.
LA.
How are we all doing today? I hope everyone was able to find parking. The valet guy called in today, so I wasn't able to have the valet for everyone. But you're in the right place. Welcome. Please find a seat. Make yourselves comfortable. We're going to get started in just a minute. We're letting everybody sign in, get situated.
New York is here.
How we doing?
Buffalo, New York is here.
Buffalo, New York is here.
St. Louis, Missouri. Excellent. Wonderful. Welcome, everyone.
Wonderful.
We're just going to get started. Oh, Milwaukee, hello.
Do you have your alarm set for 2 p.m. today?
I do not.
So it's not going to go off right before we start?
Boise, Idaho.
Welcome, Boise. Jay from St. Louis. Kev from Milwaukee. We got Chet from DTLA. Welcome, Chet.
Hi, DTLA.
Who else am I missing? Hannah from Buffalo, New York.
Saucy
What's up, Hannah?
Angeles. San Francisco.
Hello. Oh, nice. And San Francisco holding it down. Bay Area. That's where we're live streaming from today. San Francisco. So it's almost like we're like, I guess it doesn't matter where you are because it is like we are making chicken together. And that's really all that matters. Whether we're making pasta, whether we're making fried chicken, we're cooking. We're sharing recipes. We're having a good time. And you all invited me into your home, so thank you for that.
Berkeley and then Hot Chicken Bros are in the house. Oh,
Chicken Bros. Hot Chicken Bros from the Sunset? Hot Chicken Bros?
Maybe? From the north.
From the north.
From a little bit north.
From the north. Okay, Burger different Hot Chicken.
Here.
Awesome. Very, very cool. 2 p.m.
Welcome.
Shall we begin?
2 p.m. Let's begin.
Let's begin. Well, first of all, thank you everyone for being here today. Thank you for inviting me into your homes. We're making fried chicken today. Not just any fried chicken. There's a lot of different versions out there, and that's okay. Everyone has its right time and place. For me, this is the fried chicken that I crave the most often. The reason being is because we're able to achieve this wonderful contrast of textures. Crispy on the outside, kind of wet and crunchy with the sauce, and it's really just like this beautiful marriage made in the world of fried chicken. So before we get into that, a little bit of housekeeping here. If you've never been here before, welcome. Thank you so much for trusting me to teach you today. If you've been here before and you're familiar with this, then welcome back. I appreciate you making the return. But on top of that, we have Bella here in the chat room as always. So this is, although I can't see you, you can see me. And so I want to be able to be there for you. I want to hold your hand and cook with you through this entire process, start to finish. So if you have any questions, that's what the chat room is here for. You can type those questions into the chat room. Bella's going to read them off to me, and then I'll just be happy to talk about it. And the questions are not limited to the food that we're making here today. I like to talk about food. I like to talk about cooking. I like to talk about restaurants. I just like to talk. So make this interactive. This is all on you to ask whatever burning question that you've always wondered. I'm here to explain the whys we're doing everything and not just how we're doing it. That being said, what else am I forgetting? Obviously this is going to get recorded. So if you miss anything, please feel free to pause. Go ahead and watch it back. You can use this same link forever and keep watching this over and over and over as many times as you need to. So if we get a little too fast for you, that's okay. Just take it easy, take it calm, hit that pause button, and then you could catch right back up with us throughout the process. Don't forget to take photos of this. Food doesn't taste as good unless you take a picture before you eat it. I don't know if that's true, but I just really like to take photos of what I'm doing. But more importantly, I like to see the photos that all of you are making and cooking of these recipes. So take photos, post it online, tag me on Instagram. I really want to see the whole process. It makes it even more interactive for me, and I love it that much more.
We really love seeing all of the creations you make. It really makes us happy. So
it's so fun. Thank you. Thank you for if you've been doing that. If you haven't done that and you're thinking about it, this is the sign that you should.
All right, let's get started.
Let's get started. No questions thus far yet. First things first, we're going to start with our chicken. All right? Easy enough. What we're using here today is a skin-on, boneless thigh. You could use a breast. You could use skin off. I wouldn't necessarily use bone in for this method. Now, I know a few of you have asked and wondered how or where I was able to find skin-on, boneless chicken thighs. They're not the easiest thing to find. Usually they come boneless, skinless. For me, I like the skin. It adds an additional layer of crispiness and texture when you're frying. On top of that, you could just remove the bones yourself. If you're not comfortable removing chicken bones on your own, you can quickly ask your butcher or the guy behind the counter to do it for you. Even if it's in a pre-packaged container, he could open the package. He could cut that open, take out those bones. But I left one bone in so I could show everyone how to do it. Fair enough? Get your cutting board, get your knife, get your chicken. That's situated, ready to go. Before we jump into the chicken, we need to get started on our brine. What are we doing with the brine here? There's a lot of ways to make brine, whether it just be water, sugar, salt, whether it just be water, salt. You can use pickle, you can use buttermilk. It's essentially a marinade in a way. We're infusing flavor into our chicken. What I like to use for the brine here, let's go ahead and grab it. I got all my components lined up, mise en place, ready to go. And now the thing with brines is you could kind of play around with them. So rather than giving you percentages down in the recipe, because I wanted to make this accessible for everyone, not everyone has a scale, not everyone has time to mess around with percentages, but we're making a very, very, very intense brine. What I mean by intense, lots of salt, lots of sugar. We're talking like 10% salt, 5% sugar. That's like really high in the world of brines because we want to pack as much flavor into the brine in as quick of a period amount of time as possible. Now, thinking to the future or another time that you may be doing this, you can lower those percentages as much as like 2% salt and 1% sugar. Notice the salt is always twice as much as the sugar. And then you could leave it in the brine for longer, whether it be for hours or overnight, doing this way in advance. But since we're going to get this all done today, I bumped that brine percentage all the way up, made this very intense, very salty, very sweet, so that way we could pack as much flavor into that chicken as quickly as possible. Starting with that, we're going to add our water to a pan. So we have our water already measured out. I'm going to only add about half of it to the pan. The other half, I'm going to add to the container that I'm planning on brining in. So this is going to be my brine container. The other part of the water is going to go in there, along with my ice cubes. So when you're thinking about brines, you don't necessarily have to use ice cubes, but it's a fun little trick to kind of speed up this entire process. Because normally you just have to wait for the liquid to cool or come to room temperature before you can put any meat or chicken or vegetables or anything in it. But if you replace some of the water with ice cubes, because water is ice cubes and they weigh exactly the same, you can then kind of speed up that cooling down process and use your brine right away. our 2 cups of ice cubes in our container. We have half our water here, the other half of our water down here. I have all of my salt and all of my sugar. I'm using brown sugar just because I like that flavor. Brown sugar is essentially the same thing as white sugar with a little bit of molasses in it, just in case you weren't aware. But it kind of adds a nice depth of flavor and makes things kind of play with the rest of the ingredients we have going on here. Should we switch the camera angles?
Yes, let's switch the camera angles.
So we can see what's happening in the pot here. So coming into the pot, we also have some of our rosemary. So rosemary I like in this recipe. You can use thyme, you can use bay leaf. You could even use dried rosemary if you like, but you don't even have to do anything to it. You go right into the pot just like this. And then we have our aromatics. So I'm using crushed garlic and sliced ginger. The ginger you don't even have to peel. What's really nice, ginger is kind of a pain in the butt to peel. So we're just slicing this up. Garlic, same thing. If you didn't take the time to peel it, that's okay. Because what we're doing is essentially just making a really flavorful liquid here. We're not going to have to eat it. We're not going to actually cook with it. None of this stuff is getting incorporated into the recipe. So instead, you kind of take a couple of shortcuts, little time savers in the kitchen here, and not have to do those little extra steps that, might set you behind.
So how high are you putting your...
So I'm heating my stove up here. This is like medium heat. I don't want to bring this to a boil because that's just going to mean it takes longer to cool down. Instead, I'm just bringing it hot enough to dissolve and melt the salt and the sugar. And then in that dissolving process, we're also infusing that liquid, that water, that brine with the rosemary, with the garlic, with the ginger. I like kind of bringing it up in temperature all together. That kind of activates the garlic, activates the ginger, pulls flavor out of those herbs, makes everything become one. And then that way, you just have a much more flavorful liquid than if you just had your garlic and your ginger and everything over in here and it doesn't actually get hot with the rest of the components. So while this is dissolving, melting, coming together, we're talking like, 185 degrees usually is all it takes. You don't need to get crazy. About like the temperature you'd heat your tea up to. We'll get over here on our chicken. We'll do a quick little breakdown of the one chicken that I have left. The other 2 are already deboned. I'm going to come in here for safety, sanitation, and cleanliness and just use a pair of gloves while I do this demonstration so that way I don't need to worry about washing my hands and everything's kind of self-contained in this little area. So these 2 chicken thighs have already been deboned. I'm going to show you how to do this third one here. And it's a really simple process. If you've never done this, I promise you don't freak out. What you do want to come in here is with a sharp knife that you have. I like using an actual deboning knife. This is kind of like for poultry. It is has a really sharp edge. It's heavy duty. It's kind of like weighted to it. It's not like a thin or delicate knife because you're messing with a bone. You don't want to use like a fancy fish slicer or something that you'd use for carving fish. So something a little heavy duty, sturdy here. And then you have your chicken. So flipping over underneath, you could feel the direction where the bone runs, right? So we're gonna just hold the chicken open and right along on this bone, we're going to give it a little cut. So we're just gonna cut right into the chicken, right on the bone. And I can you don't have to do it in one cut. You kind of come in and you push the chicken aside and you're just slowly cutting down onto the bone and exposing back that bone and leaving the meat all around it. Once you see that the bone is exposed, you can kind of just pull your fingers down underneath there. Stick your finger underneath. Now you have a little bit of a hole, almost like a pocket underneath the bone. Now that's where you're going to stick the knife, coming down through that hole, carving up around. Now you have the bone, which is holding the rest of the meat. And all you're going to do is use your knife and scrape the meat off the bone, carving down to that end. Now, if you missed that, maybe I went too fast for you. Maybe that was the first time you've ever seen someone debone a chicken thigh. That's okay. There are plenty of YouTube videos and real in-depth demonstrations on that. That's not necessarily what we're here for today. I just wanted to show you how to do one of these in case you were stuck doing it yourself because, Maybe you didn't have a butcher at the store to do it for you. Now we just need to cut up our chicken pieces. What we're looking for is small, I would say about 1 inch by 1 inch squares. It can be very rustic. It doesn't necessarily need to be precise. And what this is going to do is give us these little boneless nuggets for frying, but it's also going to make the chicken cook much faster, which is going to play into our crispy factor, our crunchy factor. It's going to help this all come together much more quickly.
You want that crispy, crunchy goodness.
You want the crispy, crunchy goodness. I don't think anyone has ever talked about fried chicken and not used those words to describe a really good fried chicken. No one's ever like, oh, I want that really soggy fried chicken. Although maybe that's your thing. And if that's your thing, I'm totally going to support you in that. Because that's your thing. That's your preference. But for me, I want that crunchy but wet texture, which sounds weird, but I think once you have these, you'll totally know what I'm talking about. And so I'm just going through here, no real rhyme or reason, just cutting this into our little nuggets.
So if you want to kind of show how big the pieces are, just
yes,
a little
I'll show a little example of one. So this is kind of what we're looking at the palm of my hand. It's about 1 inch by 1 inch all the way around. A little boneless nugget. I feel like we've all had a chicken nugget, a boneless nugget, some sort of like fried boneless piece of chicken. And that's what we're going for here. That's what we want. Just a little piece of bone there.
Yeah, make sure you get all of
Make
the
sure you get any little pieces of cartilage or any of those little kind of connector nubs that hold the bone into the meat.
And put those to the side.
Yeah, you don't want to use those. The bones themselves, you can make a quick little stock with those. Just throw them into a pot, cover them with water, bring it up to a simmer, and then you have a little chicken stock. You keep in the fridge, you keep in the freezer. Don't let those go to waste. Utilize everything. Do a quick little, get the last of this here.
And then the brine is still on
The brine is on that low medium heat. If you ever see it boiling, you could turn it off. We don't want to reduce this because we're trying to stay somewhat precise with our math and our numbers here in terms of like how salty and how sugary we want this. Because it's so intense, in theory, I wouldn't really want to make this liquid any saltier, any sweeter. I'm going to take these gloves off. We're all done. All of this could go to the side. We're coming back over here. So our liquid is fully dissolved. Everything is infused and incorporated. I got my water ice mixture here, and I'm just going to combine the two. And now this is going to be our brine. And this will work.
That rosemary smells
Oh, it smells so good. It's rosemary and garlic like mixed together, one of my favorite aromas. Great. So this is coming together. We're just going to mix to melt the ice and to evenly distribute everything we have in here, right? So you don't necessarily need to taste this. It's going to be salty. It's going to be sugary. There's nothing to be gained from that. But we just know now we have this really intense liquid that we're going to use to marinate and infuse flavor into our chicken. You can always take this technique and change it up. You can take the rosemary out. You can put chili flakes in here. You can put pastrami spice. You can put onions, leeks. You can take the ginger out. Really, it's like a blank canvas in terms of flavor. And if you don't want flavor, but you just want to brine something, make it juicier, make it moister, season it all the way through, a brine is a great way to do that. You can just use salt and sugar. And then that little bit of salt and sugar, whether it's a piece of salmon, like a roasted piece of cauliflower, or chicken here, in this case, a brine is a great way to infuse flavor and ensure that you're going to have a fully seasoned and juicy final product. So, question?
Nope.
No,
question,
we're
yeah.
good. All
Yes.
right.
I
So-
would just remind everyone that the percentages again are just for this hour, Brian.
Right. So good point. Thank you. Very intense brine. It's only because we're leaving it brine for less than an hour. Like we're talking, it's probably only being here 25, maybe 30 minutes while we work on the other components. If you were to want to make this in advance and leave it into this brine for hours or even overnight, you would use a much less salty and less sugary brine. I would say if you're going to do hours, like 2 to 4 hours, you would probably half the amount of salt and sugar. If you're going to do overnight, you probably want a quarter the amount of salt and sugar, and then that'll extend the amount of time that you could leave it in the liquid without it getting too salty or too cured in
So
that
just
sense.
you already said, but just wanted to highlight just again.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we don't want anybody making their chicken a little too much here, right?
Too sweet.
That would be no good. So we got all of our chicken meat in here. We're done with that cutting board. We'll give this a nice little stir. And then we'll want to set this in the fridge to chill. It is chicken at the end of the day. You don't necessarily just want to leave it out for hours and hours and hours. So we're just Bella's going to take care of that. And we'll move right on to our next component. Chicken's hanging out. I'm going to set a timer.
Chef, should we cover or uncover?
Cover, thank you. Cover your chicken.
Cover
Just so it doesn't, nothing falls into it, nothing splatters out. It's raw chicken juice. You know how that is. You want to be careful, especially if you're maybe unsure of where your chicken's coming from. We want to stay safe, clean, sanitary. You know what I'm saying? So we got a fresh cutting board here. So nice. No chicken. If you need to wash your cutting board, please do that. You don't want to use the same cutting board to cut your garnishes or things on. And then what we're talking about here, we're talking garnish. What is a garnish?
Are we doing rosemary polenta cake first or garnish first?
Garnish first.
All right.
Garnish first. We're just going to get that started so it has time to curl.
Great.
And then that way, while that's done, we can come back, do the cake, then we'll make the sauce, then we'll fry the chicken.
Excellent.
Sound like a plan? That's the plan. So we have our cutting board here on the side. If you're using chives as your garnish, you just need to slice them very thin. You can leave them in batons, which will be just as delicious. You'll get bigger bites of onion in every bite. If you have scallions, I thought it would be fun to show a little move that we'd use in the restaurant called like fancy scallions. Sometimes they're called sexy scallions just because people like alliterations and play on words. They look nice. It's a fun garnish you could do with the tops of your scallions. And it's relatively easy to do at home. You just, you work on your knife cuts a little bit. So all you need is a small bowl, a container, something like that, filled with water and a couple of ice cubes because you want cold water. The cold water is going to shock the vegetable and cause it to curl up on itself. And I'll show you what I mean. So all we need are these thick green parts of the scallion. The whites you can save for another day, for another use. Totally up to you. What we're talking about here, if you see these big, thick, cut, hearty parts of the scallion. And then all we're really going to do here is come and do a really hard cross-section sort of bias cut on these, and I'll show you what I mean. So I have my scallion long ways. I have my knife right here. I'm going to use my knuckles to guide on a very, very hard bias. So this would be perpendicular to the scallion. If you cut this way, you'd end up with little rings. But instead, we're kind of going to do the opposite. We're going to go on a very hard bias, and we're just going to cut that first piece you kind of lose. That's a little freebie that goes away. Now we have a very long angle. We could go in and slice our scallions almost as long as you want, and that'll kind of give you more curl and more length to it. And you want to slice these as thin as possible. Some people are obviously more comfortable with their knives than others. So the thinner you can get it, the nicer and fancier your scallions are going to look. But even if you cut these a little bit on the thick side, they're still going to look nice. They're still going to curl up in the ice water. And this is a fun little garnish that you can make in advance. It'll make you feel like you're dining out again. Or if you've always wondered kind of how you get those fancy onion cuts that you may see at the top of like, your sushi roll or on top of some fried chicken or something like that. This is how you do it. So we're going bias, long cuts all the way across on our scallions. These little bits here we could save with the other part of our onion for the next time that we're using onions. And then we're just going to take all of these little bits here that we have.
Show kind of like a close-up of one of
Yeah,
what it
we
should
got
look
one.
like. There you go.
So you can see a very long bias with that hole in the middle because that's the center of the scallion. We cut it on a very long direction. We have a whole bunch of those. And now we're just going to take everything, place it into our ice water. And it's very important it is ice water. This won't work without the ice. You kind of need that to shock the vegetable and cause things to curl up. Give this a little stir with your finger just to kind of make sure everybody's moved around. And then we can set this aside. That's going to be our garnish for later. We don't need it now. We don't need to worry about it now. That's all done. Our knife's all done. And we're ready to go. So cutting board, we are finished with. We can set this aside as well.
Finished with both cutting boards.
Both cutting boards are done. Both our knives are done. As long as you've already cut your garlic for your sauce that we're going to make later, then you're good to go.
Mise en place.
Mise en place, right? So we have our chicken marinating, brining. We have our scallions curling. That's going to be our garnish. Excuse me. Question?
No questions yet.
Now we're going to get started on our polenta cake. So what exactly is a polenta cake? I've gotten this question a lot. Some of it has to do with verbiage. Some of it has to do with it, me taking some creative liberties and playing around with ingredients. So it's based on the idea of a cornbread, but cornbread made with, what is that? Cornmeal. What is polenta made with? It's made with cornmeal. There's often polenta being a misnomer in the sense where people think, polenta is this finely ground corn. This is a finely ground dried corn known as cornmeal. When you cook it, it becomes polenta. But technically, polenta can be any form of cooked meal. So it kind of got me thinking when I learned that, and I thought it was kind of an interesting thing because you could take your own liberties then as long as you're using a ground meal, whether that be like a flax seed, some sort of oats. If it's cooked, it becomes polenta. You're cooking that meal. That's what polenta is. Almost like some people you may have seen take creative liberties with something like risotto. If you cook farro in the style of risotto, you could call it farro risotto. Other people will argue that's not risotto, and risotto can only be made with, carnaroli rice and da-da-da-da. But just another example of how you can kind of play with names and words with food and cooking. And as long as you kind of like have some fundamental understanding of where words and names come from, I'm okay with that. I think that's okay. I think that encourages creativity and some freedoms in everybody taking their own way in the kitchen, as long as you understand where you're pulling those ideas from.
And I think it's also kind of like honoring where you got your inspiration from, is to say polenta cake, or like inspired by a cornbread.
Inspired by a cornbread, exactly.
Yeah.
And now this cornbread recipe, polenta cake recipe, whatever you want to call it, is one of my favorite back pocket recipes. What I mean by that is like a recipe that I almost always keep in my back pocket. I have it like in my knife roll. I have it in almost every one of my recipe books. Because if I'm ever in a restaurant and put in that position where it's like, hey, can you make something for family meal? What's family meal? It's that meal that, when the staff cooks for each other, everybody gets to sit down, enjoy food together before they get ready for service. That's family meal, if you're not familiar. And so this was one of those recipes passed down to me by an old pastry chef friend of mine when I first started cooking. And shout out to Nick Flores. And so I've carried this on and used it many, many times in just about every restaurant I've worked. I've shared this recipe with a lot of the other cooks that I've worked with because, I've eaten a lot of cornbread, I've eaten a lot of polenta bread, and I don't think anything compares to this. So I'm just putting it out there. This is special. It's different than everything else. And it's one of those things that's great to have in your repertoire when it comes to cooking. And I just realized I left my melted butter where you melt butter in the microwave. So I'm going to grab that.
And while Joe's getting that, I hope that everyone else is melting their butter in the microwave in order for this next step to be cooked along.
I got it. I'm back.
I was worried for a second. It took you a really long time.
Yeah, I didn't have to go far. All right. So, melted butter does not need to be hot butter. One thing, if you are using the microwave to melt your butter, please be careful. Butter is filled with water. Water turns to steam when you heat it up. It'll explode inside of your microwave if you don't do it on short, small increments. And I don't want anyone having to stop and clean butter out of their microwave today, so please just be careful. If you're more comfortable, a little pot on the stove would work as well. So, starting first, we have our sugar here in the bowl. We're going to go melted butter into the sugar. And this is a recipe you can kind of have fun and play with. So there's, X amount of salt or X amount of sugar in here. If you wanted a sweeter very much more dessert-like polenta cake, you can up the sugar in this, and the recipe's still going to work. If you wanted something more savory, that's definitely like not sweet leaning at all, you could pull back on the sugar, and the recipe's still going to work. So it's definitely one of those recipes you could turn the knobs and turn the dials on some of these ingredients and have fun with. So we're going sugar and butter. And oh yeah, did I mention the other thing I really like about this recipe? You don't need a mixer. You don't need a big like zzz thing or anything. It's all done. It's all done in one bowl, which is really nice when you're working on something like family meal, or you're trying to bake something, whether it be for your family, your kids, your loved one, and you just, you don't want to get everything out to bake. This is like a one bowl wonder in a sense. And so we're going butter and sugar mixed together until it gets white, pale, and creamy. You're somewhat going for dissolving the sugar into the butter here, but it doesn't need to be fully dissolved, and you don't need to work too much air into the mix. The more air that you do end up working into this, think of it like a cake or a cookie. If you put lots of air into this, you're going to have tons of little micro bubbles, air, when this bakes. If you just stirred this together, did not whisk it at all, you're going to have something very dense and fudgy, almost like a brownie. So if you're into that sort of thing, you could, take those liberties. Like a fudgy, brownie-like polenta cake is not the worst thing in the world.
It sounds great.
It sounds great.
Yeah, and I'm noticing your form with whisking, which I think is super important to kind of point out, because I, for the longest time, would whisk
like this.
Yes.
Such a good point, right? Thank you for pointing that out. That's awesome. So if you're not familiar, right, we're talking about whisking here. I want to show on both cameras so you can see. We're talking about whisking. A lot of people kind of are used to just holding their whisk or their spatula like this and stirring. And it just becomes very hard on the wrist. It becomes hard on the arm. You're not getting good rotation. You're not getting good leverage in the bowl. If you switch the way that you're holding this and grab it over the top, and then kind of like
a pencil, kind of.
Yeah, twist your grip almost like you're holding like a pencil. Like you could write with it in a way. You could get much more leverage from your wrist. You get much more aeration, and you're able to get those edges of the entire bowl the whole time you're mixing. So very awesome little tip there, Bella. Thank you. I like that.
Just trying to help out.
Yeah,
we have one question. Lori would like to know, would brown sugar be okay as a substitute for a dessert-style polenta cake?
Absolutely. Brown sugar would be awesome. It would kind of add that little molassy kind of depth of flavor. I don't want to say smoky because molasses isn't smoky, but kind of reminds me of like that barbecue-y kind of like flavor. 1000%. You could use that. I've used like infused sugars here. Like I've used like lavender sugar, vanilla sugar. I've used lemon sugar. What are those? You take like a piece of lavender, you take a vanilla bean, you take lemon peels, you stick them, you bury them into your sugar container for like a week, and then you have infused sugar. That's a freebie.
The more you know.
That's a freebie right there. So next, got this. See, it's nice, it's thickened, it's aerated. This is what we're looking for here.
Ooh, look at that texture and consistency. Let's,
don't eat it yet. It looks really good.
Yeah.
A little hey, how you doing? Right?
There you go.
So next we're going to come in with our eggs. Very important now, your eggs are room temperature. How do you get an egg to room temperature if you didn't remember to pull it out of the fridge? It's easy. Fill up a little cup with hot tap water, drop your eggs into it, wait 3 or 5 minutes. You have room temperature eggs in the shell, in case that wasn't clear. Don't crack your eggs. Hot tap water. Hot tap water. It's not going to cook the egg. This is like cold eggs right out of the fridge. Fill this up with hot tap water, drop the eggs in it, give it 3 to 5 minutes, pull them out. You got room temperature eggs. Great little hack, whether you're making cookies late at night that you weren't planning on making, or you forgot to pull your eggs out for your cake. The reason why they need to be room temperature is because you don't want the butter to seize. If you add cold, you're essentially adding a bunch of coldness to this and be like sticking the butter in the fridge. You don't want that. It'll cause it to seize. You want the butter to be liquid. You also want the batter to be room temperature when it goes into the oven. If you put a cold batter into the oven, it's going to take longer to bake in the center than in the outside. So very important why you're using room temperature eggs when baking versus using cold eggs. I've always wondered that, like not recently, but I've wondered that for a very long time when I first started cooking why you had to have room temperature eggs, and that's why. It is very important. So 1 egg at a time. egg in, and then you're just going to whisk the egg in completely. We're using the word emulsify. What is emulsification? It's like making a dressing or an aioli or something like that. You just want to make sure it's fully, evenly, and equally compound until your mixture is homogeneous once again. So we're looking for something like this, nice and creamy. All of that egg is evenly mixed in. Then you could go with your next egg into the mix.
And then why is it important one at a time?
One at a time, so the emulsification happens. If you add a bunch of eggs at once to something that's not really stable, like butter and sugar, you're going to end up with a broken batter, and you're not going to have each piece of fat, the butter, evenly surrounded by the egg, like on a microscopic level. And so you're going to end up with like kind of like this grainy, broken substance that's not going to bake the same. When you go to bake it, the butter might leach out because it's not protected by the little individual pieces of egg. And so you kind of end up with like a cake that might not bake evenly, it might not rise evenly. So you want to do it one at a time in order to make sure it mixes in evenly and efficiently.
This step's very important.
So next egg in the mix, coming up here, boom, boom, boom. And now this is sort of that same thing here. You can mix this for quite a bit of time, work a lot of air into it, and end up with a little more airy, fluffy, lighter cake with more little microscopic bubbles in the crumb. Or you barely mix this at all until it just comes together, and you have, once again, like more on that denser brownie-like cake, which is, you know, equally as delicious and good. And it just depends on how you prefer it. I usually try to go somewhere in the middle where it becomes pale, light, and aerated, but not necessarily white and fluffy and voluminous. So that's all in. And if you notice, I'm going to throw this out there because it's definitely going to happen when we put in our creme fraiche, that it starts to separate and look broken. That's okay. It is by design. It's a weird recipe in the sense that, like, you're not doing it in the stand mixer. You're using melted butter. You're not necessarily creaming things together. You're adding a ton of fat in the form of creme fraiche or sour cream or yogurt, something like that. So the ratios are unique in this recipe, and you may end up with something that looks broken, spotty, unmixed. You're on the right track. That's normal. It happens. Just trust the process, all right? So next we got our creme fraiche. It's like a cultured cream product. The French use it a lot in their cooking. I like it better than sour cream because it's not as tangy. It has a little more liquid to it. And for me, it's just a little more palatable. But I've used, you know, when you're in a restaurant, maybe you don't have creme fraiche, or creme fraiche is off limits for family meal, which I've often seen because creme fraiche is expensive. You could use sour cream. You could use yogurt. Any sort of like creamy, fatty, dairy-like product, like, you know, in a pinch, you probably could get away with heavy cream. I don't know if I've done it, but that's not to say it wouldn't work. This recipe's great in that sense where you can kind of play around with the ingredients and...
But the tanginess is definitely...
Yeah, the tanginess is nice.
Yeah.
It's nice.
Yes.
And it is a lot of creme fraiche. It is a lot of sour cream. And you know what? That is, from what I have gathered over the years, the secret to this recipe is if you look at other cornbread or polenta cake recipes, there's not any or this much sour cream or creme fraiche in there, and it's just like upping the fat content, makes it so moist and so tender and so flavorful to where it's like it makes it hard to compare to other cakes in that sense. So this we're just going to stir in, and like I said, this may look broken, it may not completely incorporate, but that's okay. Don't stress out about it. You just want to mix it in until you see just about all that white disappear. Now we have our dry ingredients, right? So our cornmeal, you could use very finely ground commercial cornmeal. You could use the very rustically cut cornmeal you may find at the farmer's market that has like all of the grain, all of the corn kernel husk in there. They're both great, and one is going to lead for like a softer, more uniform cake. The other one that's coarsely ground will give you like some texture, some bite in the process. So totally up to you on what you would prefer. We'll go cornmeal in first, and then we have our flour and baking soda. If I send out a message about this, if you missed it, I'm letting you know right now. The original recipe I put on the website, I forgot to put flour on it. I updated the website before this class started, so there's flour on it now. So if you were like scrambling, oh my God, there's no flour, grab some extra flour, for making your batter, which we're going to get to. There's flour in that, so everybody hopefully has flour nearby. But there is some flour in here, and for whatever reason, I had a brain space and didn't put it onto the recipe page.
Would you be able to use like any other substitutes of flour?
So yeah, that's a good question. I've done this in the restaurant for sure, where I was like, oh, I can't find cornmeal. We're out of cornmeal. I've used semolina in here and made it like a semolina cake. I've left the cornmeal out entirely and used all flour. Made it just like a cake. Works out great. You could use cake flour. You could use AP flour. You could use 00 flour. I've used all of them. I haven't tried bread flour or like whole wheat flour. It would probably work, but it may not be as moist, and it may be a little more bread-like. But you have options. So really, you could use anything here in this case. You probably, I haven't tried it, but I would say I'm like 90% certain you could use almond flour
I was about to say,
and make it
like
gluten-free.
Cassava flour.
Yeah,
almond flour.
I bet you could. I really bet you could make it gluten-free by taking the flour out entirely and replacing it with almond, cassava, rice flour. Any of those would work to make this work. So, for this, I like to sift my flour because I have my baking soda in here too. And sometimes baking soda gets a little chunky. And you don't want any chunks. You want it evenly incorporated. So I'm just going to go right into a sifter. If you don't have a sifter or something to sift your flour with, you can put this in a separate bowl and use a whisk. And just kind of whisk it all together. And that'll break up any clumps that you may have. But because of the way this cake comes together, it is important that you do sift it or whisk it, because you don't want any chunks of baking soda. Like you can see here down in the bottom, I see all these little pieces of baking soda that didn't get broken up. You can press those right through your sieve, and then that way they'll get evenly and well incorporated into your baked good. Very important. So now we have everything in the bowl. I'm going to discard my whisk now at this point and switch to a spatula. I like to use the spatulas because then you can fold. What is folding? I use it all the time. I talk about it all the time. I think it'd be very helpful. Perhaps if you saw how to fold, because this is another thing I remember teaching Bella in the way and how to use a whisk, that she would do the same thing. She would come in here like this and just kind of like stir everything together, which works, but it doesn't work that well. What will work better is if you go underhand with the whisk, or underhand with the spatula. So the whisk, we went overhand for high efficiency and high torque. We're going underhand now for the spatula, so that way we could come underneath the entire thing, scraping the bottom of the bowl and folding it over itself. Then you kind of do a little bit of a paddle just to kind of get that compound. Then you go around the edges, underneath, fold everything over itself, and you just give it a little bit of a paddle. And you're going to just continue this process, folding and paddling, until you see everything come together, and it's going to start to look like pancake batter, a thick pancake batter, maybe more like waffle batter. And this like waffle batter. And this you do not want to overmix. So don't go crazy here. We just want to make sure everything's compound evenly, that all of that flour is mixed in. If you see a couple of clumps, that's okay. And I kind of limit myself to just maybe 10 folds, just to make sure I don't overmix it. We don't want to develop gluten. Gluten's going to make for like a chewy bread-like cake, where we really want a light, fluffy, delicate, kind of crumble, melt apart, fall apart in your mouth. The fluffiest of cakes. And this is what we have left, right? Beautiful. So good.
Smell the creme fraiche. It smells great.
I didn't say it. It's in the recipe. There was also salt in my baking soda flour mixture. If you didn't put that in yet, add it. It's in the recipe. Sorry I didn't mention it.
Now you did.
Now I did. Ha.
Caught yourself.
Caught myself.
Did you add the rosemary?
Yeah, so this is now where then I decide if I want to do rosemary.
Mm-hmm.
Totally optional. Some people really like the flavor of rosemary, other people don't. I like to use dried rosemary if I'm going to put it inside, and I'll use fresh rosemary if I'm going to sprinkle it on top. Totally up to you how many layers of rosemary you want to use. If you don't have dried rosemary, you could put chopped up fresh rosemary inside. You just would want to use a little less. Fresh rosemary is much more pungent and strong than the dried stuff. And so I usually just take a little sprinkling. It's about like half a teaspoon or so. and we'll just mix that in right at the very end. And that way there's like just the essence of rosemary through the whole cake. And then I'm going to sprinkle a little more fresh on top because I love the way it looks. And I think rosemary is absolutely delicious. I think it's a great flavor. I love it. I know some people are like, oh, rosemary, it's too much for me. That's okay. It's fine. People are like that. So that's done. If you haven't tasted this yet, or like lick the spatula when no one's looking, it's really good.
Well, you don't condone eating raw eggs, but...
Oh, right. Unless you have pasteurized eggs or safe eggs from the chickens in your own backyard and you're comfortable eating those, then yes, this is absolutely delicious. So, we have our baking tray here. This is going to go in a 325 degree oven. If you haven't preheated your oven, you can throw it on right now, 325. This isn't like making bread or pizza where you need to preheat the oven for hours and hours and hours. Just a preheated oven, 325 is easy enough to do. And then your baking dish side is totally variable. So when I tested this recipe, I did it in a 9x9, and I had a very thick cake that took a little longer to bake. Today I'm doing it in a 9x13, which is obviously going to lead for a thinner cake that's not going to take as long to bake. You could go even wider and have even thinner, or you could go shallower. You could put this into a cupcake tray and have little individual mini polenta cupcakes, which would be absolutely adorable and delicious. But the one thing you do, yes?
We do have a question. Jenna wants to know, do you warm it with your hands before adding or no?
Warm what with my hands?
Jenna, what do you warm?
Jenna, what are you talking about? What do I need to warm with my hands? It's a good question, but I don't know. We'll come back to that. So, with our baking tray, no matter what kind of baking tray you're using, spray is your best friend. And even with parchment paper, like I will show you, I still use spray. It's kind of like an extra set of insurance. So we're going to go spray all inside the container first. This is a good little trick. Then you could go parchment down on the bottom. Press the parchment down onto the spray. Then we'll go more spray on top of the parchment. Then I like to sometimes come in with a second piece of parchment and go horizontally. And now this is kind of optional. I learned this, I do this in the restaurant, so that way I'm able to grab and pull this out once it's baked. And that'll help lift the whole cake up and come out of the pan. If you're not really concerned about pulling the cake out and you don't mind cutting little pieces or working out of your pan, you don't need that extra piece of parchment right there, totally optional. But then once again, don't forget to come in and spray that piece of parchment as well. So now we're well lubricated, so there's going to be no sticking. Question, Jenna.
If you warm the rosemary with your hands before adding it.
Oh, no, I don't. I don't know if... I imagine you mean like, when you make a cocktail, sometimes you'll like slap the mint or you'll slap the basil. I remember my mom used to rub parsley between her hands, dried parsley or dried oregano. She'd rub between her hands before adding it to sauces. I've never really done that. It's something I never caught on to. I don't. If that's, something you're into, I'm not against it.
Yeah.
At all.
And then Cassandra would like to know, is that baking spray or just regular nonstick spray?
Oh, I don't know what the difference is. That's a good question, Cassandra. You may have to look at the ingredients on what baking spray is, because a baking spray could technically be like one of those marketing gimmicks that they came up with. It's like, oh, it's baking spray, and who knows what that is. Maybe they add something to it. Maybe there's nothing in it. I don't know what the difference. This is nonstick spray. It's like it's canola oil in a sense, in the spray form. So I don't know the answer to that question, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think it's just regular nonstick spray.
It's nonstick spray. It's regular nonstick spray. It's called Vegeline Food Release Spray. Premium 3-oil blend, gluten-free, trans-fat-free, sodium-free. Trusted by chefs for more than 70 years.
I approve this message.
I approve this message. So we got our polenta mix here coming down. We're just going to dump the whole mix right into the base of our baking tray. Get every last little bit. And then with our spatula, very gently spread this around to all of the edges. And you can see here with a 9x13, they're going to be more on the thin side versus if you're using a 9x9 pan, they would be a little thicker. So just keep that in mind when you're baking. And something else to note on baking, if you are going 9x9, I'll tell you right now. It does take about 45 minutes or so to bake. And halfway through, I ended up putting foil over the top of mine so that it didn't burn because it was browning quicker than it was cooking on the inside. So that's for a very thick cake. Something like this, where it's thin, it's maybe an inch, 3/4 of an inch high. I'm not worried about it browning more quickly than it coming together. So I don't think we're going to need foil. I don't think we're going to have to play with the temperature on the oven. 325 into the oven. We'll set like an 18-minute timer and take a look at it and see.
But definitely great tip. If you see it browning too much and it's not
cooked in the center,
put a little foil.
Foil tint. A little foil tint over the top will stop it from getting color and help put some of that heat back into it so it cooks more quickly and evenly into the center.
Great tips and tricks.
Tips and tricks with Joe, Sasto, and Bella. Thanks for joining. I'm going to go throw this in the oven, and then we'll come back and do our sauce.
And set an 18-minute timer, exactly, just so we can check to make sure if it needs a little more time, a little less time, a little rotation happening.
Great. All right, I'm back. So I see my ice cubes melted over in my scallion tray over there. I'm just adding a couple more ice cubes so that way it's cold in the water. Good? Good. I'm good. Let's clean up for a second. Let's organize ourselves.
Reorganize ourselves.
Get situated. Don't need this anymore. Don't need this anymore. Working on trays is a nice way to kind of keep things neat and clean and organized. Have a little wipe down towel and get your surfaces nice and clean.
I think that's also a great reminder for everyone. If cooking seems a little stressful for you, it's better just to kind of center yourself, clean up your little station a little. And
I tell people that all the time, especially like in a restaurant setting, where like normally you're in your station and you have like this little area you're working in. And like people will have so many things to do. They'll be prepping. They got a lot of things on their plate. And they'll start to get stressed out because they're not cleaning up as they go. And rather than setting this up, putting this stuff aside, making sure everything is nice and stacked and neat and organized, they'll just try to kind of work around it. And it just makes for more of a mess. It makes your mental state much more frazzled and frantic. And that can happen even at home, where cooking should be laid back. It's relaxing. We're hanging out. We're making fried chicken and polenta cake. So take a second, give yourself that space and that organization, and it'll make all the difference in how the enjoyment comes from cooking versus getting stressed out about the whole process. Because I don't want you to be stressed. We're living our best life here today, all right? Next, we're going over to the stove, and we're going to make our honey butter sauce. So this is a sauce kind of inspired by a few different things. Kind of like that spicy, sweet sauce you would find on like Korean fried chicken. Inspired by some friends of mine who have a restaurant in Chicago called Honey Butter Fried Chicken. Their version of honey butter is a little different. They do like a traditional southern style fried chicken and then make a whipped honey butter that you dip the fried chicken in, which is awesome, but not this. Two different versions. So lots of different ways to think about this, pulling inspiration from all over the place.
is this the same kind of glaze that you did on Top Chef?
This is similar to the glaze I did on Top Chef. The one I did on Top Chef was leaning more so in the Asian direction with some of the ingredients. But it is a very similar process in what we're doing. And personally, if I were going to eat one of them again, I would make it this one. And if you want to make the Top Chef version, you do this the same way, and you add a little fish sauce, you add a little ginger, and you kind of have the same thing. So
that one was so
that one was really good. Did someone ask that?
No, that's just me.
We were just rewatching that, by the way, which if you haven't watched season 15, it's a really good one. So we're heating up our pan here.
Umami Burger says, impressively organized, Joe. Thanks, Umami
Oh, thanks,
Burger.
Umami Burger. Are you the actual Umami Burger? Like the Umami Burger? That's great.
Is that our friend?
So next, right? Chicken has been marinating for about 30 minutes, so we want to get the sauce done so we can pull the chicken out. Starting with the sauce here, we're going to get butter down into the bottom of our pan. I'm using this big kind of wok-like pan just because I know I'm going to toss my chicken in it all at once when I'm done. We're using a whole stick of butter.
And then what's the stove on?
We're going medium heat here. That's
Medium
about
heat.
300 degrees.
Linda would like to know, could you make muffins or mini muffins from the polenta cake batter?
Oh yeah, Linda, you missed it. We talked about it. Cupcakes, mini muffins, any shape or size. If you have like star molds or like, I don't know, whatever it is. Yes, absolutely. They'll bake into whatever shape or design you want.
Definitely keep an eye on them though, because they might be.
They're going to cook differently.
They're going to
cook differently.
So keep an eye on the cooking.
You can tell Bella's, with a chef. She has a lot of these really great tips, right?
This is where you get all your recipes from, is me.
Yeah, she's my inspiration for everything,
Let's be
actually.
honest.
Let's be real here. All right, so butter is melted. We're bubbling. We're sizzling. We're at like that medium-high heat, right? So there's actually stuff happening in the pan. We don't want to brown the butter, but now we're coming in with our chopped garlic. If you are making the Top Chef version of the sauce, it's half garlic, half ginger, half green onion bottoms. But we're not doing that. We're just doing a garlicky honey butter fried chicken. So all of our garlic down into that butter. We're going to stir and turn the whole pan, moving everything around. We're not looking to brown the butter, and we're not looking to brown the garlic. We just want to take that raw edge off of the garlic. Things should start to smell incredible right now, by the way. If you're not like intoxicated by the aroma of foamy butter and garlic,
So good.
man, one of my favorite smells in life, I think, right here.
Garlic butter.
If we could put this into a candle, I don't know if anyone would buy it, but
Someone
I would
already
enjoy it.
recommended you have your own candle.
Yeah, why don't you start a candle line? Freshly baked bread and roasted garlic. All the culinary smells, right?
Focaccia?
So next, butter, garlic. It's been about a minute here in the pan. Now we're going to come in with our next ingredient. We have our chili pastes, right? So sambal, which is like a chili garlic paste, and gochujang, which is a fermented rice paste with Korean chili flakes in it. So the amount of each of these can vary depending on the level of spice that you want. Totally optional. If you don't want spicy at all, leave them out. Put no spices in here. That's totally fine. Go with just the honey butter and the garlic. But I like a little bit of spice. I love the flavor and texture that gochujang gives it. It gives it kind of like the stickiness and unctuousness to the whole dish. So I'm going both the sambal and the gochujang. Gochujang is one of my favorite ingredients. You can find it in most grocery stores now. It's not like a very hard thing to find anymore. For a while, it was one of the specialty ingredients you had to go to like an Asian market for. But no longer is the case. So now we're going to go our chili pastes into our butter mixture. Turn the heat down on your pan if you notice you're getting color or things are happening too quickly for you. That's okay.
You turned yours down?
I turned mine down.
Mm-hmm. About low?
Yeah, I'm on low right now.
Okay.
We're on low. We're mixing together all of our chili. And now, if you have a lot of heat in your pan, your garlic can burn, your chilies can burn. Things can happen too fast, and you don't want that to happen. So don't be afraid to cook on a lower heat. Make things happen more slowly. Once you see the butter has turned nice and red, you smell the blooming chilies. These are getting really intoxicating now. Now I'm going to come in with my tamari. So tamari is like soy sauce, but it's gluten-free. It's made just from soy. Soy sauce often has wheat in it too. So tamari to me is a much more pleasant flavor. It's often not as salty. It's sometimes a little sweeter. I love tamari anytime. I rarely use soy sauce. I almost always use tamari. And same thing, grocery store, you find it much more easier to find these days. And this bit of liquid that we're about to add is going to quickly kind of stop any burning or cooking that may be happening in the pan, because that tamari is going to deglaze our pan and all the fat that we have.
And I want you to clarify, you usually use tamari for cooking.
For
correct?
cooking.
For
For cooking and eating most of the time.
Yeah, we do love soy sauce though.
Yeah, the few times I'll use soy sauce is like if I want a smoked soy sauce or if I want a white soy sauce, which are both things. And so that's when I'll often pull out the soy. Otherwise, most of the time it's tamari. I'm going back on a lowish heat here, right, like 230 degrees. Just so nothing burns. Mixing in the soy. Once you see everything nice and bubbling again, now you can come in with your honey. We're building layers. We're kind of like doing a classical sauce work technique here. So like you're roasting your aromatics. You got some fat in the pan. you're adding deglazing like you would wine or something. Now you're coming in with your sweetener or your body, veal stock, something like that. So you're really kind of building using solid classical French technique to make a sauce for a fried chicken. So honey here, about 1/4 cup is a good place to start. You could go more, you could go less, depending on the level of sweetness that you want. And then same thing here, you're just going to bring that heat back up until this gets all bubbly, some of that water and the soy evaporates.
Smells great.
And it should get sticky, it should get gooey, and it should be delicious. Don't taste this yet. It's deceptively hot with all of that sugar and honey you have in there. It could easily burn your finger, burn your tongue. So you don't want to just stick your spoon in here right away. If you do, let it cool off before you taste it. And then you can adjust if you need to. I'm not adding any salt to this. The soy or the tamari, whatever case you're using, has salt in it, as well as the chicken is seasoned. So I don't want to add any salt yet. I don't want to make this to be like a salty sauce by any means. But once you kind of bring this back to a boil, that honey and that butter and all those spices and everything emulsifies. And you're left with this beautiful, bubbly, thick and sticky glaze. And it's important you do bring this back to a boil before you're done, because you do want to kind of cook off some of that liquid that's left in the honey. You know what I forgot to do, everyone? We forgot to set a timer when the cornbread went in the oven.
Oh no, Chef Joe.
It's okay, I remembered though.
Did you remember what time it was, Chef?
I don't remember what time it was. It's been about 8 minutes.
Has it been?
I'm gonna go 10 more minutes.
Alright.
Because I looked at how long it's been, the chicken's been brining, and so I remember that. But remember to set a timer, everyone. This is a good learning moment.
Or just watch your oven.
Yeah, or just stand near your oven.
So
So we have our glaze, beautiful. Oh my God. Now this is a great dip for anything. You toss green beans, broccoli, cauliflower, mushrooms, chicken, fish, beef, anything into here, and you're gonna be a very happy person. We're gonna set that off to the side. If you have a stove with more than one burner, you could leave it on here, turn it off, let it hang out, and we're gonna move along in our whole process here, yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Do you want to pass that to me, Chef?
Yeah, there's good. I don't want it to knock over it.
Alright.
All right, so our chicken we're about to pull out of our brine, but before we do, we need to get our pot of fryer oil onto the stove. So, frying, the elephant in the room.
Someone set a timer. Hannah set a timer. 7 minutes left on 18-minute timer. Great job, guys.
Oh, okay, so I was 3 minutes off because I have 10 minutes left. Thank you,
Good job,
Hannah.
everyone.
Well done. Teamwork makes the dream work, huh? All right. So the elephant in the room, fryer oil. Not everybody's into frying. Not a lot of people like or have the space to put a big pot filled with oil on the stove. I like to look at it like this. It's just fried meals are a special occasion. You're not going to fry something all of the time, or at least I'm not. But I'm okay with going through this whole process and doing the whole song and dance, because to me it's worth it. It's a special occasion, it's a special meal. Just like anytime something else you might not make every day, but you treat it like a special occasion when you do. And that's how I like to look at frying. Fryer oil itself, you can reuse it. You strain it, you let it cool, you put it in a cool, dark place in an airtight container. You can use it again in the future. So you get like 2 or 3 uses out of this oil. Don't feel like it's one and done in that sense. And, you know, maybe invite some friends over when it's safe and kind of make it a big thing. Don't just go through all this work for yourself. Although, let's be real, I've definitely gone through all this work for just myself.
We're going through, yes, for us right now.
for just us. So, I'm going to use a probe thermometer here
Treat yourself.
to be able to monitor the temperature of my oil. Probe oil. Okay. Boom. All right. So, if you do not have a probe thermometer, you need some sort of kitchen thermometer, something to monitor the temperature of the oil. You can kind of do this by eye, but it's very hard. What we're looking for is we're going to do 2 fries here. We're going to do a low temperature fry to set our coating, to set our batter, and partially cook everything. We're going to let it hang out. We're going to increase the temperature to the oil much, much higher. 375 versus like 275, about 100-degree difference. Then we're going to fry it again. That's going to draw tons of moisture. It's going to make things nice and crispy. It's going to give it its beautiful golden brown color, and it's going to then be ready to toss into our sauce. So, pan is heating up. Oil is coming up to temperature. If you had more than one burner, you could have totally had this done or going, but you know, we're all here together. Now we're waiting for oil to heat up. That's all right. Let's get our chicken out of the brine. It's been about 45 minutes. It's probably, you know, right on that edge of how long you want to let this go because of how salty it is. I'm going to just drain this right into a strainer. And then I'm going to pick out just what I can see in terms of these aromatics. We don't need them. They're going to get in the way.
What brand of pro thermometer do you use?
So this is a Breville Polyscience Control Freak. It's an induction burner. It comes with the probe. It's part of the unit. So there's a setting on here where you just click probe and it connects and it heats it up and keeps it right at my whatever temperature I set it at. If you don't have one of those, I also, like before I had one of these, I use like one of those kitchen candy thermometer things that hook onto the side of the pot, and it looks like an old school traditional thermometer. Works just as well. You just have to monitor your temperature a little more. Where this, I set it and kind of forget it. The luxuries of modern technology. Otherwise, you just have to play with that knob, turn it up, turn it down, just to kind of land you right around 275, 300 degrees, which is going to be our magic frying temperature. So I'm just going through here, pulling out all of the garlic and ginger, just so I don't end up frying the garlic and ginger. It wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, but at the same time, we're waiting for oil to heat up, so you might as well just kind of get this going.
And is the first fry going to be without anything?
No. The first fry will be with the batter, which we're going to make next.
Excellent.
That's a good question. Was someone trying to jump ahead?
No, that was me.
All right.
I was trying to jump ahead.
Bella was ready to jump
That was
ahead.
me
She was
today.
ready to fry the chicken
I'm
before
ready
we
to
put
fry the
anything
chicken.
on it. All right. So, chicken is done. Brine, discard. Brine is never, ever anything you want to use more than once. It is not like fryer oil. Once you use the brine, it's trash. Don't try to use it again. If you do make a lot of brine and only use half of it, you could save the rest. So like in the restaurant, we would do that. We would make big batches of brine at the beginning of the week. We would just pull off is whatever we needed every time we had to brine a piece of fish or brine some chicken or whatever it was, and then save that brine, use it all week long. Once it's used though, it's done. You've kind of like, because essentially this brine is replacing the water that's naturally found in whatever food product with the seasoned water, and then it's expelling the water that was in here. So we're kind of exchanging. Osmosis is happening here. Liquid in, liquid out, and you don't want to ever reuse that briny liquid. Just throwing it out there.
Do you ever put brine aromatics in a cheesecloth?
You totally could put it in a cheesecloth. It's one more step. Like if I was doing a huge batch of this, or like, you know, more than just for this, I would definitely put it in a cheesecloth or strain them. Well, no, I wouldn't strain them out because I want them in the brine as it's cooling and brining. So yes, a cheesecloth would be great, but in this case, I don't think it's necessary because we're making such a small amount.
And if you fry some garlic, you fry some
And if you fry some garlic, you fry some garlic. It's not the end of the world. If you're making like a Lexan or a giant tub of fried chicken and you have a ton of garlic and a ton of ginger, a ton of rosemary to pick out, oh yeah, cheesecloth's going to be your best friend. Next, we're going to, hold on, here we go. We're going to make our batter. All right, so this is a batter.
Hold on, has it been 7 minutes?
Hannah, you got to help me out. I press 10 minutes on my timer, never press start.
Will and Hannah, help us out.
Yeah, well, Hannah's going to let me know if I should go check on my cornbread. I typed in 10 and then never pressed go. That's awesome. So don't be like me and actually use your timer.
Can we save that aromatics for the stock?
I would, same thing with the aromatics. I would not necessarily reuse them just because they've been sitting in like a chickeny liquid. I wouldn't. You could, I guess, rinse them off and put them into chicken stock. It's going to get cooked and you're using it as stock. It wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. I just wouldn't do it. That's me. But I mean, you could do whatever you want.
Actually, 1 minute left on the.
1 minute left.
We should.
Should I check it?
Let's go check
I'm gonna go check it.
Let's go check.
Everybody take a break. Check your cake.
Drink some water. Make sure the cats aren't running around, like I hear them doing. 15 seconds left. Here we go. Is the polenta cake getting there? We will see. Only time will tell. Literally.
Can we stop for a moment and appreciate Hannah for catching our cake
Thanks, Will and Hannah.
at the perfect time?
Thanks, Will and Hannah.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And we have a beautifully baked golden brown all the way across polenta cake. I stuck a little cake tester in here just to make sure it came out clean, like a toothpick or a knife or something like that. Just to make sure that it's cooked all the way in the center, came out nice and clean. That's ready to go.
Will and Hannah are the sous chefs of the day.
Yeah, lifesavers. Thank you so much. So, last thing now.
Ooh, that's beautiful. Golden brown.
Oh, it came out so nice. So we have our pieces of rosemary we could use as garnish. I don't like to necessarily eat just raw rosemary like this. So when our oil comes up to temperature, we'll dip one of these sprigs into the oil. It'll get nice and fried and crispy. It'll fuse the oil with a little bit of rosemary flavor. And then you can take all those fried pieces of rosemary, sprinkle it over the top of your cake, and you have these beautiful pieces of rosemary that are kind of like crunchy, delicious, more palatable, and not like eating this woody piece. And then if you do have a rosemary bush outside like we do, you'll notice they bloom these beautiful little purple flowers. So if you ever see those, they're edible, they're delicious, they're from the rosemary plant, and you can make your food look picture perfect just like on Instagram with those. So, cake is done. That's cooling off to the side.
Oh, and just to know, if your cake isn't done, let it in.
Let it go longer.
Yeah.
Use your cake tester. When it comes out clean, it's done. That's the only way to really tell. So use a toothpick, use a knife, use a cake tester, something, stick in the center, pull it out. If it comes out clean, you're ready. All right? So in our batter here now, this is very loosely inspired by a tempura batter. It is like a Korean fried chicken style batter that you would find like in Korean fried chicken restaurants and things like that. It's a mix of cornstarch, all-purpose flour, and baking soda. So the secret ingredient here is really the cornstarch. You could make a gluten-free version of this with rice flour and cornstarch. That's what I did on Top Chef. But you could also, I like the little bit of AP flour in here because the cornstarch kind of counteracts and counterbalances that AP flour by it swells when there's liquid added to it. Prohibits some of that gluten formation, and it causes it to have a very light, crisp coating versus something that could get soft and soggy. So really great combination we have there, equal parts. It's an easy recipe to remember. I like to season it up with some white pepper. Totally optional. You can use black pepper or you just leave it out entirely. Now I don't add salt, again, to the batter for the same reason. We have salty chicken over here with a lot of that brine kind of still sitting on it. So I don't feel like there's any need to add salt to this mixture. But I do like to come in here with a whisk and mix all of my starches together before I add any liquid to this, just to make sure everything is evenly combined, mixed together. Let's go with that. So everything is evenly mixed together. We got our batter coming together. And now this is a batter you don't necessarily want to make too far in advance. So there's a reason why we're doing it now versus doing it first thing. Because you don't want it to sit, you don't want the flour to hydrate too much. It'll get gummy, it'll get sticky. You want that carbonated water or sparkling water that you're using to stay carbonated. And last but not least, you want this to be as cold as possible. Why is that important? Well, when you're talking about tempura or batters or things that are frying, the colder the batter versus the hotter the oil is going to kind of cause this reaction to happen where the oil won't be able to attack whatever it is that you're frying. You'll get a crispier exterior and crispier coating by having that bigger variation in temperature on whatever you're putting into your fryer than the actual temperature it is. So very important that you have a cold batter, which means we're going to use some ice cubes, we're going to use our sparkling water, and we're going to mix this all together and scents almost a la minute because we're about to use it.
Yeah.
So sparkling water down here. I'm going to go with a couple of ice cubes just to make sure we're extra cold. And it's about a cup of everything all around. A cup of flour, a cup of cornstarch, a cup of water. And you could eyeball it. Sometimes you might need a little more, sometimes you might need a little less.
Sparkling water is very important.
You can use beer. I don't like to use beer because beer has flavor. And I don't want the flavor of hops or barley or beer in my batter. But if you really are into that and you're like, oh, I love it, IPA, yay, then like you could totally do that. Like that's cool. I'm into it. But just for me, not in this case. So we got our icy cold liquid here with our ice cubes floating in it, about a cup. We're just going to mix that in little by little.
Have you ever made fried chicken using 00 flour instead of AB flour?
I have. I didn't notice that much of a difference. I noticed much more of a difference using 00 flour for pizza dough than with frying. And that's just me. So that was a cup of water, and you can see we're still very lumpy. So I need a little more. Like I said, it's a little different every day. That's why it's sometimes nice to just eyeball it. But what we're looking for here is a thin, crepe-like batter. Getting closer.
Crepe-like.
Crepe.
Crepe. Do you say crepe or do you say crepe?
I know I'm supposed to say crepe, but I say crepe. And that's just, you know what's so
You're
funny
French,
is my
so-
mom is French, and she taught me how to make crepes, but she called them crepes.
That's
And
okay.
so, and she used to speak French when she was younger, but then I think she just spent too much time not speaking it, and so she started calling them crepes like everyone else. All right, we're getting closer.
We're going to say crepe batter. Everyone say crepe at home.
Everyone say crepe.
Crepe.
Don't try to say croissant. How did you? Bella speaks French, so she makes fun of me sometimes. Crepe or croissant. So what we have here is our tempura batter.
We're not,
Neither
we're
of
not-
the two.
Neither of the two.
So what we have here is a very ribbon-like thin batter. See how that kind of falls off my whisk here?
Can this batter be accidentally overmixed?
I would say it can be accidentally overmixed if you like sat here for 5 minutes mixing it. But as long as you get it to this point and it's mixed and it's good and it's done. If you're just here talking about crepes and croissants and you're not paying attention, you could overmix it. You don't want to develop any gluten. But I feel pretty good about where we're at right here.
You want it to be this consistent.
You want it to be thin. I'm going to go one more splash of, just because I see it's kind of thick in the bowl.
So yeah, definitely.
And that was, for anyone keeping track, this is a 12-ounce can. I used almost the whole 12 ounces
of the sparkling water.
of the sparkling water. Just about. Ice cold with the ice cubes. Batter. Just like that. Beautiful. Done. Done with these containers. Get them out of here. Done with our
Sparkles.
our water. I'm sorry. Our oil.
Why do we use sparkling water? Jean wants to know.
Oh, good question. So you could use ice water in itself, just ice cold water. But what ends up happening when you use sparkling water, there's bubbles in there, little effervescence. And that's going to help make a lighter, crispier batter. Same reason, why beer batter is often light and crispy, because of the bubbles, not because of the beer. Sparkling water is going to make this batter light and crispy versus dense and hard or sometimes chewy. So for me, I think it makes a big difference to use sparkling water versus trying to omit it. So batter looks good. Now we have our drained chicken. We can come right into the batter. We're done with the brine and the strainer. And then we'll come in here. I'm just using the tongs. You could use chopsticks. You could use your hands. I would not use your strainer. And just give this all a real nice mix to make sure everybody is well and evenly coated.
Could you use like a big fork, or do you recommend more tongs?
I recommend tongs because the tongs are going to help you drop it into the oil. A fork you're not going to be able to put into the oil. You could use your fingers with gloves it becomes difficult to do, but you totally could do it. So we got all of our chicken in here. Give it a really good mix. Make sure there are no clumps, no bits that are kind of hiding that didn't get coated.
Evenly dispersed.
And it's almost in the sense where like thinner is sometimes better. With this batter, it's deceptive. Where a thick batter, you may think you get a better, thicker coating, but that's not necessarily the case. So if your batter looks like it might have thickened up or it's thickening kind of as it sits and hydrates, don't be afraid to add an extra splash of the water. Sometimes if you have your chicken still wet from the brine, there's enough water on that chicken to kind of help keep things nice and loose. But there we go. It's almost like you just added a bunch of chicken to crepe batter.
Perfect.
Take a look at where we're at here for everybody that wants to see the close-up. I know we're all here. So, thin.
Consistency is key.
Consistency is key. And if you find you start frying and you're like, oh, this doesn't look right, you can always add a little water after the first couple pieces.
Yeah.
You know, there's nothing wrong with that.
We're all learning. Everyone's learning.
We're all learning. Sometimes you won't learn until you actually start frying. And then you're like, oh, this isn't right. Let me fix this. So let's get here right in front of our camera angle so you can see what's happening in our oil. Come on in. Hey, everyone. How we doing? So,
Hello.
our oil, we are at 300 degrees. I set mine to 300 because I know it's going to drop ever so slightly when I put my ice cold chicken into it, and I don't really want it to drop below 275. So I'm accounting for about that 15 degrees of the temperature variation as I start adding my chicken. And then what we're going to do is just come in each individual piece ever so gently and give it about 30 seconds in the oil before you let go. Kind of lower it in and then let go. This is exactly the technique you would use if you're making tempura. As you go in and you let go. And any extra batter that kind of falls off here, hold on here, you know, you could let your batter drain before going into your oil.
And then why don't you want it to go below 275?
If it goes below 275, you start thinking about like what's happening when you're frying. So in the case of frying, you're using oil as your method of heat to convert water into steam. So if that water doesn't convert to steam fast enough, oil from the outside is going to come into whatever it is that you're frying. Where how you keep things not oily or not soggy from the oil is to make sure you're frying at a temperature that allows the water to turn to steam fast enough and push out the sides to stop the oil from coming in. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
It's something
it's something you like. A lot of people don't realize when they're frying what they're doing and why it's important to like fry it at the right temperature.
Yes.
And like people who are like, oh my god, that's so soggy. It was greasy fried food is a sign that the fryer was not at the right temperature. It had cooled down.
Or the fryer oil was old.
Or the fryer oil was old.
One or the other.
Two different problems. So I got almost all my first round of chicken in here. I'm kind of just moving everybody around, making sure nobody's sticking together.
And then remind we're doing a double fry, right?
And we're doing a double fry. So this is the first round at the lower temperature. I'm just draining each individual piece so I don't get too much batter into my fry oil. You don't want to overcrowd your pan at the same time. Watch your thermometer. Watch your temperature. Make sure you're giving your pan enough time to actually get to the temperature you need it at.
Are you adding all of the chicken at once?
It depends on the size of your pan. I'm not adding all of my chicken. I'm going about, I would guess about half. We'll probably end up doing in 2 batches.
Do half and half, yeah.
And do half and half. And then we'll turn the temperature up, and then we'll fry half and half again. And that's just to make sure, you know, you're doing each individual piece. And so it sometimes takes a little bit longer to fry, and you don't want those first ones you put in to overcook while you're waiting for those last ones to go in to finish cooking. But you could give everybody a nice little move around. And one thing you're looking for here is you're not going for golden brown and delicious. They're going to be white, They're going to be pale. They're not going to be their crispiest, and that's just because this is the first fry. So don't overdo this, and we'll try to get it golden brown, because you're going to end up drying out your chicken. You're going to end up overcooking your batter. When instead, what we're doing is just trying to set that first fry.
Yes. There's a method to the madness. Don't worry. Trust the process.
Trust the process. So those first few pieces of chicken are, you can see they're a very light shade of gold. That's probably as far as we want to take them. Those other pieces that I just did are getting close at the end. Beautiful. Last thing here, we have a wire rack on a tray. I like a wire rack on a tray versus like a paper towel or like something to absorb the oil, because the wire rack allows airflow. Very important that you have airflow when you're frying things and you're letting them sit on a tray. Just like with pizza or bread, if you were to just put something crispy right onto something flat, there's going to be steam trapped in between those two layers, and you're going to end up with sogginess versus crispiness. So making sure there's room for steam to escape will make sure that we have crispy chicken all the way around and everyone's happy.
Like when you bake cookies, you put them onto essentially
A wire rack to
wire
cool
rack.
in order to make sure you have a crispy bottom. No one wants a soggy bottom.
No.
Not even Paul Hollywood. Paul Hollywood always talks about soggy bottoms being a bad thing. They're a bad thing.
Yes. That's a great British baking show. No.
Yeah, reference in case you missed it.
Reference.
So
Look at
take a
the
look at where
color.
we're at here. Very light in color, light golden looking. We're gonna go right onto our rack. I could kind of tell just by color what those first couple of pieces were. And the ones that are a little lighter in color can be the last ones to come out, because they were the last ones to go in. Don't worry about seasoning these when they come out of the oil. Got to air every last little bit. If you need to, give your pan a little bit of time to come back up to temperature before coming in with your next round of frying. But if you're confident in your stove and your pan, you can go right in. Don't forget to give yourself a little bit of a drain. And you can gently drop each piece.
And then again, as a reminder, don't worry about seasoning the ones that just came out.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those counterintuitive things, right? Everybody always learns, or at least I always learn, you're always supposed to fry things or season things as soon as they come out of hot fryer oil. These are going to go back into the fryer oil. And keep in mind, we brine these so they have a beautiful fry flavor seasoned all the way through. Last couple pieces of chicken. Any questions so far? How are we all doing?
I hope
Everybody's comfortable with their frying. Nobody's freaking out. One safety rule when you're frying, if something were to go wrong, never ever put water onto fry oil or a oil fire. Oil and water don't mix. It's not going to put out your fire or your mess or whatever it is. What's better is to grab a box of salt, box of baking powder, box of cornstarch, something like that. Something that's dry and non-combustible that you can pour onto whatever that is. Maybe you don't need that information today. Hopefully you don't need that information today.
But
maybe one day in the future, you'll remember, hey, how do I put out this, spilt oil? Salt. Salt will be your best friend. So the last couple pieces of chicken, get a nice little drain on these.
But actually, has that ever happened to you in a restaurant?
Huh. Has that ever happened in the restaurant?
Has someone done that and then you had to run over with salt?
With salt, yeah. It's often, I've seen it happen in ovens, like if someone's roasting bones and like too much oil accumulates or splatters to the bottom of the oven. The bottom of the oven can catch on fire, which is obviously a really bad thing, but you end up putting salt in there to stop it. The most memorable story was my first night working at Lazy Bear. And I was...
Lazy Bear is a 2 Michelin star restaurant here in San Francisco where
Correct.
Chef Joe and I both worked. So
Where we
just-
worked.
Just a little backstory.
Backstory. So
First
this
day
is
working
story
there.
night. For my first night there, I was the chef at the time. This guy Chris was getting ready to have his first child, and we knew he was like on call. Could happen at any moment, and it happened the first night I was there. So he got the call that he needed to go to the hospital, and this was after service. We were cleaning up, so the timing was perfect. He didn't miss out on service. I was comfortable. I was like, oh yeah, I can handle, shutting down the restaurant and like hanging out with all the cooks. Right as that happens, one of the cooks is cleaning the fryer, has this big pot of oil that he drained from the fryer and has it kind of sitting off to the edge of the stove, and it heats up for whatever reason. He has it on the flame or something. The oil spills onto the stove. The whole thing goes up in flames. Chris looks at me, good luck, and then he's out the door. I'm here with a brand new crew of people. Someone just started a huge fire, essentially in the middle of the dining room. But I knew salt was the key. Went and grabbed a couple boxes of salt. We put out the fire. It was a huge mess to clean up that night, but long story short, it happens. It happens, and you don't even know when. So knowing what to do when that'll happen could save the day. Last couple pieces here. I don't think there's anything left. I'm not missing anything.
Cassandra wants to know, is that where you both met? No, we met at Quint's, which is another 3-star Michelin restaurant here in San Francisco. We met before Lazy Bear.
We met before Lazy Bear. Went to Lazy Bear together. And then the rest is history.
Opened a restaurant in LA together, and then partners now. So we've been together a long time.
A very long time. We don't keep track, though, for anyone that's about to ask.
Yes, we don't keep
I
track.
don't know how many years that's been.
No, me either. I'm not that kind of girl.
Yeah, we're not that kind of people. So last bit round of frying,
I feel like it
moving
makes
everybody
me feel,
around.
I feel like it makes me feel younger.
Yeah, when you're like, oh,
I'm like, I don't know.
you know, maybe we'll go out to dinner tomorrow on our first date. Who knows?
I won't go that far. But... Story time.
Story time. So we're coming in, last round of frying, looking good. Things are getting crispy, golden. I'm just moving everybody around just to make sure they're frying evenly. Nobody's like kind of sitting at the top, not doing anything. And one of the great things about fried chicken, especially boneless fried chicken, this isn't necessarily universal if you're talking about fried chicken that has bones. For the most part, when the chicken becomes golden brown and looks beautiful and feels beautiful and is crispy and crunchy, it's done. You don't have to worry about it being undercooked or overcooked. Chicken's kind of like that magical thing, and frying's a really great way of cooking, whether it be fish or chicken. It's usually done when it's golden brown. As long as you're cooking at the right temperature, not too high or not too low, you could count on it being right around 165 degrees, which is what you want it to be to ensure that your chicken's cooked all the way through.
Nicole would like to know, are you watching Top Chef? Are these challenges harder?
Oh, great question. We are watching this season of Top Chef. It's much more fun to watch when you're not competing and you're watching other people compete. I would say the season is definitely more challenging in the sense because of the whole way it was filmed during COVID.
So that's about,
And so it was like, you didn't have the house that you were living in with everyone. I don't think you really got to know or hang out with everyone as much as you did in the other situations, which that plays into the mental factor of the game. You're not spending every waking moment with these people because you kind of have alone time in your room or wherever, because of quarantine and everything. So it's different in that sense. The challenges themselves, I would say, are probably about Top Chef level. They're all over the map. I think one thing that you can kind of, let's turn up our oil and then we'll talk about that.
So turn it up to what?
375.
375. Great.
375, let the oil come up to temperature, skim any little bits of tempura that still might be in there so they don't burn. You have all of this beautiful fried chicken that we're going to fry once more, and then we're going to get it all tossed together to finish, so don't go anywhere. As that's heating up, Top Chef challenges. People often will think a challenge is harder or overthink a challenge without realizing that almost every challenge is designed where you can cook whatever you want. And a lot of people don't realize that, but you could cook anything you want as long as you're able to tie it into a story of the challenge. Whether you're inspired by the ingredients or inspired by the dish, or you're using whatever it is that they gave you, you could really do anything. And so a lot of people get caught up on the idea of the challenge or idea of this or the limitations when really, like, they make it to where you can do what you want for the most part. And so when you kind of start watching the show and thinking of it like that, you're like, oh, this maybe isn't that hard. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's a very hard competition just from the mental side of it alone. It is not an easy thing. And I commend everybody that puts themselves out there to go and do something like that, because it's not easy.
Yes.
It's very easy to say it's easy, but it's not.
Or it's very easy to look at a challenge and be like, oh, I would do this. It's like, well, would you really?
Would you really?
On the spot?
Yeah, you have no idea what you would do on the spot. And that's half the battle. That's the hard part too. You watch it and you're like, oh yeah, I would do this, I would do that. But I don't know. I don't know what I would do. We're coming up here. We're about 3:25. How's everybody feeling? Cornbread is resting.
Polenta cake.
Yeah, polenta cake is
We
resting.
made polenta cake today.
Let's do this. We're waiting for our oil to heat up. I feel like our polenta cake is cooled for the most part. I have the clean cutting board from my scallions, not my chicken cutting board. And now what's great about having this extra piece of parchment paper is you're able to lift your bread or your baked good right out of the tray onto whatever it is that you want to cut on, onto whatever you want to serve on, your service plate, your service vessel, and you have this beautiful, then easy to transport. You're not trying to get under there with a spatula or anything crazy like that. I'm just going to take a sprig of rosemary here. We'll dip it in the oil, about 30 seconds. You'll see it bubble, fizzle. As soon as it stops fizzling, the rosemary is fried.
Do you want to switch the,
Yeah, we can.
just move it to the side? The top part to the side?
Oh, this.
Yes.
On this view too?
No. Yes.
Is that better? Good?
It's a little lag, but I'll
Okay, yeah, there's the delay. So our oil, our rosemary is fried. I'm gonna come in, stop bubbling, pull this bad boy out. I'm gonna let it just hang out on the tray for a second and drain some of that oil. Hold on, switch screens. Now we're coming back. I have my cake here ready to go. We can slice this up. I'm gonna cut this into squares, which means probably thirds. And then
That looks excellent.
heavenly. Then I could take a little bit of my crispy fried rosemary now, pull it right off of the stem. Now you have a beautiful edible garnish. Because if you were to just stick rosemary on here, it's not going to be very delicious. It's not going to be edible. If you've never tried to just eat rosemary on its own, it's very woody. Dipping it in the oil to get a nice little quick fry on
What
it.
temperature do you want the second fry again?
375
Degrees Fahrenheit.
degrees Fahrenheit. Not Celsius. That would be very, very, very hot.
Fahrenheit.
Fahrenheit. And then we have our beautiful little rosemary flowers. Oh, come on. You see this? I'm so happy.
It smells amazing. I love the smell of rosemary.
Look what we just made, everyone. I hope you all are excited as I am about this. Beautiful, savory, moist, sweet, delicate.
Let's take a bite while we're waiting for oil.
Oh, look at that little cross section. So soft, so fluffy.
Super fluffy.
Give it a little. Really? I need a moment. It's so good.
Everyone go ahead and try it.
The amount of dairy, creme fraiche, butter in there. Just I think like it's special. It's a very special cake, and I'm very glad everybody got to try this. Our oil, we're back up 375 all the way, nice and high. So if you were maybe thinking about this as a dinner party item.
They want to see the inside of the polenta cake.
Oh yeah.
A little close up. Let's switcheroo.
So right up in there. Check it out. Not too airy, not too dense. Beautiful, delicious. Something special.
How long would the polenta cake stay good?
In an airtight container, maybe at least a day, maybe 3. I wouldn't really keep it much longer than that. It's like a cake.
Maybe 2 days.
Yeah, it's like a cake or a cookie. Keep it in an airtight container, and it'll definitely lose its freshness.
It won't be the same as today.
And it won't be the same, but share it with friends, neighbors. You could try freezing it too. You definitely get some more life out of it.
I wouldn't freeze it.
Bella wouldn't freeze it.
I would eat the whole thing.
She would eat the whole thing.
Okay.
So, I would, she wouldn't, whatever you want to do. Oil is nice and hot. If you were maybe doing this in advance, this step, the first fry, can be done in the morning. It can be done not the night before, but it could be done earlier in the day. This could hang out on the rack all day till you're ready to then do the second fry. And then you're essentially refreshing things. You're making it happen much more quickly, almost like what you would do in a restaurant. Like this would be done during prep, then this would be done when you ordered. So you could come in now with everybody right into the super hot oil, carefully.
Do you prefer thinner or thicker polenta?
You mean like polenta, not polenta cake, right?
Like when you're making polenta.
When I'm making polenta, I just saved, if maybe you missed it the other day on Instagram, I saved a story highlight of it. But I think polenta, when you're cooking it, should be almost like soft scrambled eggs. Like it should not be thin and runny. It should not be soupy. But it also shouldn't be thick like oatmeal or porridge. It should be like soft scrambled eggs, like very delicate. Where you could pick it up with a spoon, but it almost like you could like scoop away pieces of it. Think of it almost like, a really nice flan, where it's like jiggly, it's set, but if you go to touch it, it kind of like releases.
But there's a method and I think a recipe too in your Instagram story.
Yeah, I saved the whole thing. So definitely go check that out if you're interested in polenta.
Yeah.
And you have extra cornmeal and you want to make that. That's another fun one to do.
Yes.
So we're doing our second fry here. Now this is the one we're looking for golden brown, super crispy on the outside. Getting very, very close here. And this one happens much faster. High heat.
That double fry.
The double fry is really where it's at. It does magic for the chicken.
Ooh.
Beautiful.
Wow.
You could hear it crispy, crunchy on the rack. Got my last couple pieces I'm going to drop in there. Beautiful, fried, good stuff. So last round here. Maybe don't do this with your fingers if you're not as nimble and agile with hot fryer oil like I am.
Yes, if you do not have chef fingers, please be careful.
You can use your spider tool to gently lay these back.
You can be like me and use your spider tool.
Yes. Safety first, right?
1000%.
So, as these come out of the fryer, make sure, same thing, back onto the tray. Give them some space to breathe. And these are ready to go. They're delicious. You can eat them like this. You can dip them in buffalo sauce. You can put them into ranch, whatever it is that you want to do. But we just made this beautiful honey butter, sticky, spicy glaze. So we're going to toss it in that, and I'm going to show you exactly how to bring that all together as soon as I finish frying this last round. Has anyone tried the chicken yet? I'm like, it's taking everything in my power not to eat it right now because I know how hot it is. It's so hot.
Don't encourage people eating it until it's fully cooled, Chef.
Yeah, until it's cool. Please be careful. But it's so delicious and so good. What you can do is maybe eat another little piece of cornbread, polenta cake while you wait. Just a little piece though.
It's a good thing that's not near me. I would probably eat the entire thing.
You'll get some later. We need you on the chat room. Alright, last round of chicken. Getting ready to come out.
Oh, crispy.
Golden brown, beautiful. Exactly what we want here.
So joyful.
It's like happiness. It really is. And what's really nice about this batter, because of the cornstarch in there, because of the double fry, these...
Oh, so no salt in the chicken after the second fry?
So I don't, for the sake that we brined it in a very salty brine. We have this salty batter, or sauce rather, we're putting it in. And there's just so much kind of going on, I don't think it needs it. That's me. If maybe I wasn't brining it, or I had to brine it for less time and I didn't have as intense of a brine, you could maybe season it when it comes out. Go by taste. You know, taste one when after it's fried or after it goes into the sauce. And you can still always add a little more salt if it needs it. But I don't want to make things too salty, especially with something like this that it's like already a very intense, heavy sort of dish.
I think less.
So less is a little more in this case.
You
so
get
I
all
don't.
the flavors of everything else too.
Yep, I don't.
Evenly seasoned is perfect.
So we're gonna go here, back over high heat. We're gonna bring our sauce back up to temperature, high heat, and we're just gonna get this nice and almost try to replicate, you know, what a wok would do. High heat, caramelize all of those sugars, cook off any additional water that may be in there, because water is like crunchiness's enemy. So if we're able to remove any moisture that we have in here, getting this really nice and glazed, thick, sticky, bubbly, and hot, then we toss in our chicken, coat, toss, and we'll be ready to eat. And the bowl, Bella, I hid.
Yes, you did.
Right there, right near you. This is going to be our serving bowl. Be careful with the hot oil over here. Once that oil cools, you can strain it, put it into a container, save it. Sometimes I'll put it back in like the jug that the oil came from, as long as it's strained and clean and cool. And you can reuse it the next time you need to fry something. Totally acceptable.
But definitely straining is the key.
Yeah, straining is the key. So we're going...
Or you can discard of it.
Get the heat back up here to bring this all together. Wait for this to get bubbly.
High heat, is that?
High heat. Oh, here we go. I start to see the bubbles start to get nice and thick. Right at first, as soon as you start to reheat it, the butter is going to separate. Continue to stir and whisk it. Bring it up over higher heat. As soon as you get your temperature back up in your pan, things will get nice and glazed and beautiful, bubbly. Then over the high heat, kill it, grab our chicken, right into the mix.
Ooh. How much are you doing, Chef?
And I mean, you could fit all of this chicken into here. It's all gonna fit. I know I want to eat some of this plain, because that's just me. But, hear that crunch. Toss this all in.
It smells so good.
It smells heavenly.
So good. That crunchy crunch though.
Crunchy, crispy. Then we can go right from here into our bowl.
And then don't forget about those scallion
Oh,
girls.
I did not.
No, everyone. Not you, Chef. Everyone.
Yeah, we got our garnish still to make things look beautiful and fancy. So coming in here, whole big bowl of our chicken goodness. switch views real quick. So that's done. Move this to the side. Last but not least, our finishing touch. We have our scallion curls here. They have curled up in our ice water. Give them one more little stir. Sometimes that's all they need just to get like nice and opened and curly. And then I've set myself up here with a little bit of a paper towel on a tray just to drain any excess water. And then you can see, maybe we'll jump close again. Why not? We'll go back and forth. You'll see exactly what I'm talking about here. You get these beautiful, curled, kind of opened up, all sort of crazy directions and designs. And you can see too, if you don't cut it thin enough, nothing exactly is going to happen. It needs to be thin enough to be able to allow those vegetable fibers to curl in the ice water. But then you have your beautiful bowl of chicken.
Jenna says this recipe combo, I can't, is so good. Yay! So glad you
Your
liked
scallions. Oh man.
it. Ooh,
Who is excited to eat this?
I am.
I am so excited. The moment of truth. I've been waiting weeks for this moment. Bella laughs, but she knows it's true.
Oh, yes.
And you know what? It doesn't need the salt. Seasoned all the way through. You got that really intense brine. Sweet, spicy, salty from the tamari. Does not need the salt when it comes out of the fryer. You have this beautiful kind of like soft, delicate bread. This is like almost like a side dish. Almost like dessert. Almost like a palate cleanser.
It's perfect.
And then you go back to your fried chicken. And you're like, oh my God. Life is good. Things are good.
Sunday fun day.
Sunday fun day. Do we have any questions? Now is the time for the questions. I know it takes a minute or so to get in here, so we'll talk until there are any questions.
There is a really short delay.
There's a delay, so it's fine. That being said, I had a great time today. This is a really fun one for me. Thank you, everyone, for joining, for being a part of this, for inviting both of us into your homes. Thank you for that. Some big announcements for the future. This Friday, the Sasto tools by Doghouse Forge. We're talking about scrapers. We're talking about pizza cutters and wheels. All of them interchangeable. The top screw on and off, so you can get all different handles, things like that. Maybe you've seen these, maybe you haven't. It's my pasta tool and pizza tool line by a friend, Jonathan Porter, down in Florida. Makes all these really talented blacksmith. He won that show, Forge and Fire, if you've ever seen that. Very cool show. But the new release will be this Friday at noon, so set a reminder. You all are the first to know here. Also, in addition to that, some other fun facts, fun announcements. We have a few spots left in our two-way web conference pasta making streams. Not this week, last 2 weeks of April. So check those out on Chef's Feet if you have not already. And then otherwise, May is still up in the air. So we may or may not still have classes for May. So that could be your last chance to jump in and make pasta together, ask those questions. And I'm excited to actually get to meet people face to face. I know a lot of you have already signed up. So thank you. You got your spot. Questions?
Yes. Gloria says they can't thank you enough. Yay, excellent. I want to hear the crunch again.
Oh, we could go in for an if you twist my arm, I'll take another bite.
Nice recipe, so good. Oh, great. I'm so glad everyone is enjoying. Was that a big hot one? That was
That was a big hot one. But we want to hear the crunch? Oh, this is a big crunchy one. Right by the crunch crunch. Oh, yeah. Now we're talking.
Can you give the link address for the forged goods?
If you go to doghouseforge.com, his homepage, click on Sasto Store, it'll take you through the whole process. Right? Doghouseforge.com?
Yep, I'm looking right now. And noon, what time zone for the pasta and pizza tool release?
Noon.
Yes, he's on EST.
He's on EST. I think it's noon EST. And they go fast. So be ready for it. And he He does a lot of releases for all of his tools, his knives and everything. So he has his own huge following. And people get upset if he makes it at midnight because then people need to stay awake in order to get the release. So he likes a noon Eastern time, so that way West Coast people can get it, East Coast people can get it. Nobody has to stay up till midnight, and you're able to sign on right away, check out, get what you need. And I think, that'll be for April. We should have another release in May if you miss it, but this is the one. Very exciting stuff. And any other questions?
What's next for you post-COVID? This is from Will.
Oh, hey, Will. Good question. We're figuring it out in terms of what is next. Well, we know what is next for obviously the next couple of months. We have these tools working in the works, cookbook proposals, working on 2 different consumer packaged goods, a frozen pasta and a consumable kind of pasta snack. We have restaurant concepts. I'm kind of talking with partners about figuring out the right place and the right time to do that. Obviously, the world is going back to normal, but very, very slowly. And it is a new normal. So we're, just making sure we make the right decisions, as I think everyone is right now.
Yes, and making sure that, everything, the world is safe before we go into opening up another...
Going to opening a restaurant right now.
Would this work with tenders?
This would work with tenders. You could do tenders for sure. It'll work with, if we were going to do mushrooms, I would do maitake mushrooms, which is like these big meaty mushrooms you could kind of like pull into nice chunks that are about the size of the chicken.
I think they're also called hen of the woods.
I think they're also called hen of the woods. You could do it with creminis or something like that, but the maitakes work really nicely. Oysters work well. You could do it with cauliflower. You could do it with broccoli. You could do it with fish, like whitefish, halibut, cod, something like that would work really well. You could even do it with like beef, ribeye or filet or something like that would work wonderfully. And you kind of have then, a huge repertoire of fried goodies at your fingertips.
Yeah. And then before everyone leaves, we just want to say thank you. And if you do have any questions, make sure to ask Joe on Instagram and use the taco emoji at the beginning of your message to make sure that we know you're in this class or one of our classes and it doesn't get lost in all the other messages.
Exactly. I'm going to say that again just in case you missed it. If you have any questions in the future and you didn't get a chance to ask it now, use the taco emoji at the beginning of your message. Send me a DM on Instagram. It's our little secret code that you've taken one of these classes with me. And that way I know that, we're BFFs now at this point. You've supported me. I want to support you and answer whatever question is that you have about cooking or about the recipe or whatever it may be. So, social media is for communicating and being social with people. So let's use it in that way. You have the taco emoji now. It's our little in and secret messaging system for each other. So, questions in the future, you know how to get a hold of me. Otherwise, if that's it for today, everybody, I hope you enjoy your chicken. I hope you enjoy your polenta cake. And one more question.
Yeah, just a few more questions that are coming in. Hannah says, is there a way to put items in a cart so you can check out at noon?
I don't think so.
I think we just be sure to, before 5, if you can do it now, just make sure 5 minutes before make sure that they're in there again.
I don't think you can. I don't know the answer to that, Hannah. I'm sorry. Every online store is different. Because I think right now if you go and check, they're all sold out. There's nothing there. So I don't think there's anything to add to your cart because there's not in stock until noon.
But if there is, just make sure. Double check.
Double check.
Always double check. I think that's it for questions. Anybody else have any questions? Yeah.
Awesome. You guys are great. Thank you, everyone, once again for joining. And I'm looking forward to the next time and meeting anybody that's going to join in on one of those pasta classes in the next 2 weeks. I'm looking forward to it. Everyone have a great day. And
happy Sunday.
Very much love. Happy Sunday.
Thank you.